artist at heart. I have 2 music degrees in arts administration, masters as well. But I've been working in the philanthropy space. My name's Josh Birkholz. He, him, middle-aged white person, beard, black jacket, gray, sort of walking around center stage. I am CEO of the fundraising consulting company BWF, author of the books Fundraising Analytics and Benefactors, and for the last dozen years I've been involved in Giving USA, the last 2 years as chair of the board. From that perspective, I continue to be amazed at how resilient we see the field of generosity. Despite all the economic setbacks and headwinds, giving remains resilient, and I'm optimistic about that. And I'd like to call on the next 12 minutes on the wonderful people in the field of philanthropy and in the arts to move forward boldly and with confidence as we talk about giving in a changing economy. Now, the times, they do keep a-changing, and we can all rattle them off. There's been a lot of change. People ask what's the new normal and what is normal anymore. We've seen, probably starting from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, where we saw some impact on giving and giving trends. Certainly the disruption of the pandemic, the racial awakening around racial justice in the last few years. We've got elections. We've got international conflicts and domestic challenges, humanitarian disasters. The number of donors giving in the United States continues to decline. But the one most often mentioned is inflation, or perhaps the inflation perceptions. And the reality is we do face economic headwinds. They are blowing at us, they're blowing at giving, and it is something that's a formidable foe. But perhaps the perceptions are worse than the realities. The reality is inflation has been pretty rough. In the last 4 to 5 years, everything now costs about 25% more than it did 4 to 5 years ago. So even though inflation's been moderating, in fact, I think just yesterday we saw those numbers go down below 3%, it's still on top of some growth that we've seen. So for most people going to the store, trying to decide between milk and eggs or gas, or should I give $100 to the arts organization, it's a tougher decision than it used to be. Now, the reality is that has had an impact on the everyday donor. The number of people giving has declined every year for decades. Not the per capita, the number of people that give in the United States has been declining. So this has really posed the question, as we see giving numbers going up, has giving just become a thing of the rich? Is there a place for everybody anymore in philanthropy? At the same time, the definitions of giving are changing. They're broadening. We certainly see giving beyond giving to registered charities, which is what the Giving USA Foundation has tracked for decades. We've seen when someone gives a generous tip at a restaurant, they're giving to a GoFundMe, they're taking care of their friends and family, that's generosity, that's benevolence. I dare say that generosity has not decreased, but giving to charities, the number of people that do has. So I think that's something to consider, that there's still a value of generosity. The other headwind that probably not many of us know, or maybe some of us track, has been the trust in the nonprofit sector. This is a recent study from Edelman, where they pointed out that charities have actually fallen below big business in how many people trust it. It's still beating government and news media, but just by a tiny hair's amount. Now, perhaps the silver lining to this is that 70% of people do trust charities that are in their backyard. So I've talked about all these headwinds, but giving remains resilient, and that's what I'm so excited about. Over the last 40 years, giving has only gone down 4 times. And in periods where there's been a recession, giving has gone up during recessions more than it has gone down. This last year, we had $557 billion given. Now, this isn't a value like a stock market. What's the value of the charitable sector? These are new gifts. It starts over at 0 every year. So in 2023, the last complete year on record, there was $557 billion in new gifts, over $500 billion. We've seen that continue to go up. Now, we've not hit the peak of 2021, which really was lifted up mainly by inflation adjustment, but also some revisions. But giving has gone up. We've also seen the GDP, which is the gross domestic product, a measure of the country's health, has gone up as well as personal income. And giving has remained around 2% of the GDP really since the 1950s that we've been tracking it. It's been a little bit up after being down in the 80s a little bit. So we continue to maintain that rate along with the economy. Another aspect is the asset markets have been going up. In 2022, one of the 4 times that giving went down, it was the stock market crashing in the fourth quarter that kind of pulled it down. We've seen a bigger connection to asset wealth. Partly this is a matter of, as high net worth donors make up a larger portion of the giving, their giving is more likely from appreciated assets than from their income. So things such as real estate and the stock market have a bigger impact. But even as the stock market goes up and down and in a spiky way, giving trends along with it, but it's pretty resilient. It's resilient to the pulls down, but it does also move up when the stock market goes up, and that's fueling giving. The other thing that's changing is that how donors are giving is different. 40 years ago, individuals made up 82% of giving, and many people have noted that foundations has gone from 6% to 19%, actually crossing the 100 billion mark the last 2 years. A large portion. We actually see this as an evidence of still individuals giving in different ways, because we find the high net worth more likely to structure, to give through donor advised funds, to set up foundations or set up other mechanisms for their giving. We still estimate about 83% of the decisions around philanthropy are made by an individual, even if it's manifest through a foundation, through a company giving program, certainly through their bequests after they've met actuarial realities. Now, the arts specifically has actually fared quite well. It was one of 4 sectors to grow by more than 10% last year, when all of giving grew by 2% in current dollars, actually flat to declining when you look at inflation. Now, the 4 sectors that grew were foundations, which includes the community foundations, public society benefit, which is a broad category, including federated charities such as the United Way, but also the national donor advice fund sponsoring groups like Schwab Charitable, Vanguard, et cetera, Fidelity. And then education sector and the arts, culture, and humanities. Now, those 4 sectors are the most often given to by the high net worth individuals. So we're also seeing that their success might be reflected in that. Now, the arts specifically has been unprecedented growth. It has been the top growing sector. In fact, I mentioned in 2022 giving went down, the arts actually went up. It was counter to what all of philanthropy did. On top of a record 2021 where we saw 27.5% growth and then the 11% this last year, we're seeing giving go up to the arts. Now, it's not just the high net worth assets that have changed. As we learned from Sunil, there's an essential need aspect to the arts. Many philanthropy experts believe that giving is sort of like Maslow's hierarchy. When times are tough, we give to food, to safety, to essential needs. And when times are great, we give to the future, to self-actualization, to thinking about the human condition and where we might be. But once the arts was taken away from us, we realized that the arts is an essential need. Meeting together, understanding the human condition is critical for us. I think that's been a big driver of philanthropy. Second is the arts chose to invest in technologies like what Priya had mentioned. And we're going to see even more than 17%, I think, after that wonderful talk, where we're seeing investments in fundraising and in technology like Tessitura, commitments to the future of this space. Corporations also, some would note that giving has gone up by corporations, but we've seen a long-term trend that the amount they're giving as a percent of their profits has gone down. Now, to their credit, they're also broadening their view of what it means to be generous and benevolent, and I will give credit for seeing more social impact investing activities and initiatives, DEI programs, environmental commitments, volunteer time off policies that are benevolent activities, even if we're not seeing that in charitable giving. But I'd love to encourage a little bit more charitable giving from these corporations nonetheless. And one other bright spot is I mentioned trust is down in the general public, but in the donor population over the last 6 years, we're actually seeing donors have increased favorability towards nonprofits. They actually went up by about 6%. You can see, especially in the millennial and the boomer generations. Us Gen Xers, we're still in the meh zone, I guess, so we'll just have to roll with that. So with all that said, in this changing economy, what should we do as fundraisers? What's actionable from this? I'm gonna suggest 4 things just to get the conversation going. One is choose to invest in that everyday donor. We have some part in everybody being part of philanthropy. And part of that is doing research into the drivers of participation, sharing the data like Sunil mentioned, with each other at your own organization. Think about intrinsic value messaging alongside impact messaging. The high net worth responds very well to impact messaging. We give so that this impact can happen. We found that the everyday donor responds slightly more to value messaging, remembering that generosity is a value. Giving is better than receiving. It feels good to give. Giving is what people like us do. That kind of is intrinsic messaging, being part of a group. Join the attention economy with mass personalization in digital fundraising. Second, I recommend building donor community. You're not just cultivating donors to you, you're cultivating them with each other. We found that donors that have friends with other donors are 4 times more resilient during economic downturns than when they're not friends with other donors. Communities can rally when times are uncertain, and it's actually pretty easy to do. I mean, this doesn't need to be some fancy person-to-person technique. Even with your meeting with the donor, like, hey, you should meet my friend Sheila. She's so much like you, you'd be fast friends. That type of connection can do so much for your donor community. Third, we saw that donors are giving in different ways. Be prepared to take gifts of different types. Diversify your fundraising revenue for corporation, foundation giving, individual. You're deferred and multi-channel. Be equipped at the organizational level, but also at the individual level when you work with individual donors. Be able to talk about blended gifts beyond just bequests and outright, but all the different ways they might give from different assets, from sponsorships, the employees if they're at a company, foundations, their donor advised funds. Now, these are a few things I set out to say. I remain optimistic, and I want to call on all of you to be confident and boldly, move boldly ahead. And the future is certainly uncertain. But I predict that giving will continue to grow. All the economic markers are pointing towards growth in the philanthropic space. I believe that generosity is stronger than the economy because generosity is a value, and our values are more important than the economy to many of us. And while it's my dearest hope that we turn the tide on the decline among donors, I don't think it's going to quite happen, but I really hope we do, because ultimately, I believe every person deserves to experience the joy of philanthropy. So thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time.